Like and follow if you love horror. Robert followed the pull that he felt deep in his gut. He hadn't been fast enough in the bank, and Elby had escaped him. He moved now, less confused than he had been when he first left the hospital, but still in a bit of a daze. In the peripheral, he was aware the world was different. He was aware time was divided into two parts. On one side, things were familiar, and he had been a young man with a future he was willing to throw away. On the other side, he had exited the hospital, and the future was here. But it was warped, and in both parts. Cedric Elby evaded justice, real justice. Not for long, though. He could hear the man humming. Cedric liked to hum after he had his way. He hummed a little lullaby that would have been soothing from the mouth of a mother, but was cruel and mocking from the lips of a monster. Robert wasn't sure how Elby slipped away at the bank. Much like the hospital, things had jumped. One moment he was following Elby into the vault, and the next there was the corpse and the screaming. Elby was somehow knocking him out and escaping before he could come to. Robert wouldn't stop, though. Elby was making a mistake not killing him when he had the chance. When he caught Elby, he would make sure Elby felt every ounce of pain he had ever dished out. Robert felt the sudden pull from the building in front of him. There in the window, he saw the silhouette he could never forget, one that had haunted his nightmares from the time he was a small child. But he felt strong, despite whatever Elby was doing to him. He felt powerful and was sure this time he would catch the maniac and finally put him in the ground. He breathed in, tasting the air, which felt charged with energy. This was it. This would be his chance to finally seal the chapter on Elby. The humming got louder as Robert approached the door. It was pounding through his skull, shaking him to his core as he stepped into the building. Art of every description filled the building. Vases, framed paintings, sculptures, and items that seemed familiar even to Robert. Or it would if he could see straight. The pain in his skull was like a migraine that pounded through his entire body. It forced him to his knees, and the world around him shook and blurred from one moment to the next. The humming had become a drone that boiled away all sense of control and power. Something in the next room shined like a shaft of sunlight glinting off a silver mirror directly into Robert's eyes. But through all the pain and the cacophony, Robert could just make out Elby's laughter. He launched himself forward to silence the laughter once and for all. Joe Jack stared at the open door of the auction hall and at the arm that sat, severed from its body, in the doorway. The suit sleeve was ruined, but the wrist still sported a fancy gold watch that still ticked. High quality, that. He didn't usually catch up with UPs this quickly. This was still the picking apart the puzzle part of the case. As much as Joe Jack enjoyed his hand cannon Widowmaker, he was good at the puzzle part. They all were in their own way. Diana, Jira, and he could dissect a UP pretty handedly. Jira and Diana could figure out... Jira knew everything there was to know about technology, and Diana could figure out the behavioral patterns of anything pretty quickly. It was strange, actually. The woman was bright as the sun and understood why people did things, why people thought things, but seemed personally incapable of putting it into action. He never much cared to think of the whys. It was hard enough to imagine why people did the horrible things they did. The idea of pondering on why monsters did what they did, well, at least you become a monster, as Mima had said from time to time. He refocused on the case as not to think about it anymore. Joe Jack crossed his arms. His eyes were glued on the limb, but his mind was miles away. What did he bring to the table with this team? Magic? Ronnie did magic. Combat? Both Ronnie and Miranda were better in a fight than he was. Maybe it was the medicine, or it was the weird pseudoscience that made up alchemy and hedge magic. He had been working in a diner off a dirt road when Miranda had showed up and offered him a job. A real job. One that would help people. Unlike most of his kin, Joe Jack's life had been a whirlwind that put him all over the map of the South and Southeast. He had run away from home and had made his way through Georgia and Louisiana. It wasn't safe for a young child, but Joe Jack had Granny at his shoulder even then. He had his own private underground railroad that had led him from hedge witch to shaman to medicine woman, and so on through the bayou of the pine woods of East Texas. He had spent some time there, sharpening his skills before heading into the big city of North Texas to finally try and join the modern world. Before Meemaw had died, before Granny and his sisters had dragged him back to the mountains, there he had worked the night shift in a shitty diner, not too unlike Hattie's, if Hattie's only served grizzled woods and mountain men of his home. During the day, his time belonged to the family. That meant healing and treating all manner of maladies, natural or less so. But Miranda had offered Joe Jack freedom from the prison that was his future with the family, an escape from the pain of memories of living in those mountains. He hadn't cared if it was a trap or a prank or a test. He leapt at the opportunity and was grateful as hell when Granny continued to gift him with his powers. Though, even without her, he was no slouch. Joe Jack knew his skills were in high demand. Most Appalachians wouldn't deal with the government. Even if they did, they wouldn't last 5 minutes. It was the sort of miracle he had managed to make it as far. But even with his skills and knowledge, he would never be called on to lead a seminar the way Diana was. He just wasn't the sort Miranda wanted to put in front of people. He wasn't a good first impression. He was what Wolfe called an acquired taste. That pulled his mind to the show. He hoped he wouldn't have to cancel because another body dropped. He was about to consider excuses to get out of the show when Miranda's gruff bark pulled him out of his headspace. "Coolidge, there's more inside if you would care to join me." The sarcasm bit deep. Miranda was never a patient woman, but Joe Jack appreciated that. He had grown up around strong-as-stone women with no time for bullshit. Men in his area learned quick that you respect Granny or you end up in a stew. "Coming, ma'am?" he snapped before grabbing the forensics kit from the trunk and stepping over the severed arm with the nice watch. It was much worse beyond the door. Outside was just one arm. Inside was, well, everything else. At least 3 men had died in this large open room, and there were thousands of dollars in property damage on top of that. The UP had thrown the men around like rag dolls. Bits of men and splashes of blood marred most surfaces. Not one body was left intact. Joe Jack guessed at least 2 of them had died from blood loss. "Damn," Joe Jack muttered, turning in a circle to take in the carnage. "Indeed, Coolidge." Miranda joined him and crossed her arms over her chest, eyes color of steel, taking in every detail. While Joe Jack was looking at the injuries on the victims, Miranda was looking over the scraps of evidence. Nothing physical, again, but this time the blood was still warm. This time nothing had a chance to dissipate or evaporate. She gestured with her chin to where someone's guts had been strung through several chairs. It took Joe Jack a few minutes while he took in the sheer brutality of the kill, but then he saw it. Softly glowing sludge that was swiftly evaporating. "Is that ectoplasm? You're saying to me a Casper did this?" "It looked like ectoplasm to me, but then again, Ancient Coolidge," Miranda's voice had a pissed-off quality, "I don't have the forensics kit." "Yes, ma'am." Joe Jack hurried over. Irritated, they couldn't all be emotionless lycanthropes who had probably fought in some sort of ancient war or something.